Good evening, everyone. Throughout the rain, I'm glad to see that you all still showed up this evening, so welcome. I am Karen Manning, the Engagement and Inclusion Librarian here at Georgia Tech Library. I'm so happy about this, what we're branding a Black History Month event, and so happy to have this collaboration with the student groups. After all, one of Georgia Tech's values is students are our top priority. And so I was really glad to hear about Sam's story, about her grandfather, and how we could possibly bring it back to light as a Black History Month event. Sam graciously accepted the offer. Our archivist did a little bit of work. They'll talk about that this evening. And we're interested in what else you all doing here on campus, so you all be able to enlighten us about the other things that's happening on Georgia Tech campus. So we don't want to waste too much time because we want to dive right into this program. I've been excited about it, and I am happy and so happy to have each and every one of you all here. Also, thank you to the people online. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here with us also. So let's just all sit back, relax, and hear some storytelling. I want to introduce Sam Bolton. Samantha Sam Bolton. She's the president of the Organization for Social Activism, Woke Ambassador, Diversity Ambassador, and a student ambassador. And she has a very enlightening story that we can't wait to hear. Welcome, Sam Bolton. You need this one?
Hey everybody, how are we doing today? Glad to hear it. Well, thank you guys all for coming out today. I really do. I love to see everyone here. I'm really glad that I get this chance to talk about this story. But one thing I do want to start with, as much as I am excited to share this story with you all, I want to make it very clear this event is not about my grandfather. This event is about Georgia Tech's history. It's about a history that doesn't welcome acknowledgement. It's not as appealing. It doesn't look as good on the Georgia Tech website. This is about the full history, the whole history, not just the history that we want to see. So I'll start with my grandfather's story. I don't know if any of you saw the article that came out yesterday, but the Georgia Tech Institution Communications did come out with a story about my grandfather. And so I'll tell a little bit about that background in case you didn't see it. So my grandfather, Robert Cheesebro, he was applying to Georgia Tech in 1953, a 19-year-old kid my age, applying to Georgia Tech as a transfer student from Morehouse. Obviously, he did not get in on account of his race, and he was offered scholarship aid to go to the University of Rochester in New York. That's the story. So I'm going to tell you my story, my side of finding out this story and what it's been like since then. So for me, it all started when I got into tech. My mother, she mentioned that she knew of a story that had to do with my grandfather and the school, but we didn't know much about it. So she did a deep dive. She had to go in the depths of the internet to find just a number for a box in the Library of Congress. Just that number, that's all we had. And so we reached out to the Library of Congress, and in the NAACP files was this box that contained my grandfather's life. And so they scanned it in, and in this box was everything. It was the correspondence of a kid, once again, my age, begging this institution to see him as human, to see him as an equal. And then it contained the correspondence of this school saying, "You are not." And so, for me, that was very hard to see. I knew my grandfather, obviously. I hadn't been able to get to know him as much as I wish I had before he passed, but it was hard to read. And so my first instinct when I, kind of read about this history that I had no idea about before that. I did not realize how much went into it. But after reading this, also one thing I want to mention, in this box as well, Thurgood Marshall was involved. There were correspondence to and from Thurgood Marshall. There were articles across the country about this case, about my grandfather. And once again, it was reduced to a box that Georgia Tech had completely forgotten about and probably did not know existed. And so for me, what I did is I wrote about it. I'm a writer, so I ended up just writing letters, or what the letters I would want to send to the registrar and to my grandfather. And I ended up submitting those to my local newspaper. I ended up writing an article for them. And then it was picked up by the Charlotte Observer after he passed, which he did actually pass after I'd gotten into tech. They covered it. They covered his obituary on the front page. And then I ended up speaking about this story on Spectrum News for North Carolina, the North Carolina Spectrum News. And before I did, I called Georgia Tech. And the person I spoke with will remain nameless, and I don't remember exactly what he said. I don't have a transcript, but I remember it sounded something like, "This story looks bad on us. I don't know what you want us to do about it." And so I spoke on this story. But what I talked about wasn't just, this is the life of my grandfather. What I spoke about is, this is a life that has gone completely forgotten, just like so many other lives from that time. This is a life from a time period before acknowledgement. And the real tragedy is not just my grandfather's life, but the tragedy of anyone who has Black heritage. That's the history. That's the reality of it. People weren't allowed to come here. And so after getting into tech and starting OSA, and I ended up speaking on, I spoke at the MLK ceremony last year. And here I spoke about the same thing. I spoke about a little bit about my grandfather's story, and I spoke about how if we don't acknowledge this history, it's bound to repeat itself. Not to the same extent, but we're already facing those things. When I started my speech, I said, there's talk of race getting taken off of applications. Now race has been taken off of applications because collectively we are ignoring this history. We're ignoring the fact that 2 generations ago, our ancestors, our heritage, our grandparents couldn't attend this institution along with many other institutions and just this level of education. So I'm here today. Oh, and I do want to go into the fact that after that speech, I ended up talking to President Gilbert himself. I spoke to Dr. Irvin. I spoke with the archivists, which they're going to get into what they found after our conversation. I spoke with Lawrence Williams. I had a 4-hour conversation at a coffee shop with Lawrence Williams, and that was it. And everyone I spoke to said, this is an amazing story. We want to talk about it. We want people to know. Nothing happened. So for 2 years, I've been trying to get this institution, all starting with that phone call to institution communications. I've been begging the school to at least share this story. Not just the story, but the idea that this happened. Not just to him, but to other people. We already know of 2 other documented people that applied. But just even the idea that only 3 Black people had applied before 1961, think about all the people that just didn't dare apply, for the safety of their lives for every reason possible. And so I begged the school to just at least acknowledge that any of this happened. And I was sent on a wild goose chase, and I finally got them to air the story yesterday. But the reason we're here today is to recognize the greater history, to recognize that my grandfather is part of Georgia Tech's history. A week ago, I was in Student Ambassadors Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion training. And one thing they talked about, one thing that student ambassadors do is we lead, tours for prospective students, for alumni. And during this training, they were telling us about the history that we should also address. We should talk about the pioneers. We should talk about Ronald Yancey, because that is Georgia Tech history. And I was sitting in this room holding back tears, actually, because I was thinking to myself, my grandfather should be Georgia Tech history. He is Georgia Tech history. Everyone who didn't get in to Georgia Tech is Georgia Tech history. Everyone that they kept out, that is Georgia Tech's active history. And the repercussions of everyone that they kept out of this institution is Georgia Tech's responsibility. Everyone that they kept out is Georgia Tech's responsibility. And that is the message for today. Understanding that if we don't recognize that past, and we don't recognize what the oppressive history, what the racist history of this institution has, the impact that has had on communities and families across the country. Because my mother grew up in Crenshaw, California. There are families everywhere that have been affected by this institution, and if they don't recognize that, they are responsible for the collective ignorance to the repercussions that we're facing today. And I'm going in circles, but what I really want to say is that we need to acknowledge the past if we want to understand where we are now, and if we want to understand why race is important, if we want to understand why race shouldn't be taken off applications, we need to understand our history. So today we are talking about Georgia Tech's history. Thank you.
What a compelling story. And the way I look at it is that Sam is Georgia Tech living Black history. So that's very important to have these living stories also. Thank you so much, Sam. Next, we will have a presentation by our archivists here in the Georgia Tech Library. Once the story got to them and they did some work, they'll be able to tell more about what they did to help make the records accessible and discoverable. So we will have Alex McGee, who is our university archivist, and Alex Brinson, who is our Association of College and Research Libraries diversity resident. Welcome, Alex and Alex.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm wearing a lavalier mic, so it sounds weird to me. So as Karen just said, my name is Alex McGee. I'm the university archivist here, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Alex Brinson. I'm an ACRL diversity resident here at the library, and I use she, her pronouns.
So the Georgia Tech story of desegregation, this quote up here. Georgia Tech was the first public university in the Deep South to integrate peacefully without a court order. That sounds really nice, and it is factually true, but it belies the lived experience of the three men pictured here. So the reality is that in 1961, Ford C. Green, Ralph A. Long Jr., and Lawrence Williams became the first Black students to enroll at Georgia Tech. These students experienced social isolation, discrimination. They were guarded by plainclothes policemen on campus. They did not get to live in the dorms. And the most telling fact is that none of these men stayed at Tech and graduated. Lawrence Williams did get drafted into the Air Force, but the others transferred elsewhere and finished their degrees. But again, there is more to the story of desegregation, and that begins before 1961. As Sam just shared, the story of her grandfather is one that sent us in the archives to search for records about him. We looked at the places that you would think they would be, so like the president's papers. We did not find anything there. What we instead found was a really oddly named collection called the Board of Regents Records, which this is a little inside knowledge, but we are not the keepers of the Board of Regents Records. That's going to be at the State Archive, so we should not have a collection called that. So I looked at the boxes, and what we found inside were records about Robert Chesebrough, but also records about others that had attempted to integrate Georgia Tech. And so enter Alex. Alex joined the Georgia Tech Library last year, and she had picked archives as an area of concentration for her work, particularly calling out an interest in reparative description, which is essentially going back and adding more detail, highlighting these stories in our collections. And so she actually did the work, so I'm going to let her talk about it.
Thank you. So when I received the Board of Regents records, it was organized in 3 boxes. The folder titles were pretty vague. Some examples of this are like Board of Regents 1960 to 1963. So not a lot of information to go on what's actually in those folders. So my job consisted of going through page by page to determine what stories were being highlighted here and how I could describe them better so people could actually use this information in their research. And in going through the collection, multiple topics emerged. Obviously, we came here because of Sam's story about her grandfather, but I also discovered some documents pertaining to the Loyalty Oath Act that Georgia state employees have to sign, the Sugar Bowl student protest that happened in 1956, textbook challenges, and more. So there's a lot going on in this collection. But our focus today is on desegregation, and so I thought I'd share some of the things that I discovered here. We know that Chesebrough applied in March of 1953, and there were other prospective student letters that were here as well. So even before Chesebrough, there was record of Calvin Jackson applying in May of 1952. And following both Chesebrough and Jackson, there's also record of a Willie T. Davis sending an inquiry about applying to Tech. in December of 1955. And so all of these prospective Black students received a similar letter that said something in the vein of, "We don't accept Black students at Georgia Tech. This is a list of schools that do outside of the state of Georgia, and you're free to apply those places. And if you're accepted, we will help with the out-of-state fees." And so then another interesting thing that came out of this collection was a series of documents showing the efforts of Curtis R. Cosby in September of 1963 to desegregate athletic events here at Georgia Tech. He was an Atlanta citizen, as far as I could tell, not affiliated with Georgia Tech, but he wanted to attend a football game at Grant Field, and he noticed that it was segregated. So he sent a letter, and we have the letters back and forth between President Harrison and others trying to decide how to handle this situation because they were fearful of negative press if they told him no. But they were also wary of any violence that could occur if they let him purchase a ticket. Ultimately, the documentation that I found, though, shows that President Harrison decides it's better to just let him purchase a ticket. But all of this information came from this redescription project. And obviously, if you're interested in these materials, they are in their respective collections now. We've restored those to where they should have always been. And you can find them under Board of Regents, a series titled Board of Regents. And so this work is just beginning. A lot of what I've talked to you about today, I did in the fall of 2023, but Alex and I are still working to continue this conversation and promote this project and engage with the community. Some of these ways we're doing this are I'm working on a digital exhibit or module to kind of share the historical context around a lot of these materials. There will also be a reading room exhibit in our archives reading room where you can see a physical display of some of this stuff. An Institute Communications news article is in the works as well, and Alex and I will be featured on Lost in the Stacks rock and roll radio show coming up here shortly. So if you're interested in hearing more, that's where you can find us. And so I'll just wrap up this section by reiterating kind of why this work matters. We had these records on Robert Cheeseborough and others in our tens of thousands of boxes, and we just didn't know. And unfortunately, this is not uncommon. A lot of marginalized people's stories get lost in history this way. They're mislabeled or poorly described. And this isn't just something that happens at Georgia Tech. It happens across the country in a lot of archives. So it really is a testament to why this work matters. And I'll go ahead and pass it back to Alex.
So yeah, in this particular example, Sam shared her grandfather's story, and her advocacy is what alerted us to it. As Alex mentioned, we have thousands of boxes in our collections. At the time when Sam first met with me, I had been here, I think, 6 months. I'd barely scratched the surface of what Georgia Tech history was. I've now been here a year and a half. I probably will never get to go through all the boxes that we have. So that's why it really matters that we're having this conversation. The takeaway for me, and I hope the takeaway for you guys today, is that we will always be learning about Georgia Tech's history. And we will always be expanding our understanding of Georgia Tech's history. We at Georgia Tech need to recognize that this is going to be iterative work, meaning we will always be building and redefining what it is we know about Georgia Tech. In our minds, Alex and I, the library and the archives are a really important partner in this work, simply because we will continue to look at Georgia Tech community and understand what else can be done and what is still missing from this historical record. For better or for worse, I do think there is power to be in the quote-unquote official record. And that's because when people are researching something about Georgia Tech, they're going to come to the archives and ask what we have. They're going to ask us to help fact-check something. And that's internal to Georgia Tech, but also external. And so it's really important to ensure that what we have in the archives is discoverable, it's accessible, it's described in a way that makes sense to our users so that they know that they can find what they want, what they're looking for. And I think it's also really important that if we don't have that story, we know how to direct someone and connect people to where it is. So in this example, like the collection on Robert Cheeseborough at the NAACP records at Library of Congress, that's a connection that we would want to make and point people towards. And so that is all we have. So thank you so much. These are our emails if you do want to talk to us about it or have any questions about this particular collection, but we will turn it over.
So as we see, there's more to come in archives and ways that we're still going to be making sure that this story is also disseminated and stays alive for at least a while. Sam, you want to come up and introduce is this me or you?
Okay, hey again, y'all. So we're gonna get into this next part of the presentation. If you guys wanna come up and join me, we're gonna go into the aspect talking about the history since 1961, kind of discussing both sides once again, because not all that glitters is gold, and you know a lot of the progress we've made is boasted in a way that kind of overshadows the reality of a lot of what actually happened at the institution. So, is there a clicker?
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, I think we're good.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Sam. My name's Adiba Wasike. I'm a fourth-year public policy major. I'm the vice president external for the Organization of Social Activism and the vice president internal of Student Ambassadors.
Hi, everybody. My name is Camille Trotman. I am the current NAACP president and chartering member. I'm also the vice president of the Xi Alpha chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated on campus. I am somewhat of the president of the Black Student Athlete Association that was newly created. I'm also I'm also a career peer DEI advisor for the Career Center, and I'm under Chisholm in SGA as the chair for athletics.
Okay. Can y'all hear me? Is this working? Oh, okay, I think so. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this quote. In 1961, Georgia Tech became the first university in the Deep South to admit African American students without a court order. This is straight from the Georgia Tech website. This is straight from the Georgia Tech website, and this is what I saw as I was doing my research on. Is everything good? Okay. But as I was doing the research on my grandfather's story and trying to figure out, you know, all the details of it, this is a link that my sister sent me to this website that has this quote on it. And I remember being very disheartened, knowing that, you know, our institution was boasting, you know, how quickly they had been to desegregate and how much progress they had made, and you know, kind of that the position they held as a very progressive institution. And it kind of represented to me how a lot of the progress that is made, it is acknowledged, but then in a way that overshadows, you know, the other side of the progress that was made and the other parts of the darker, you know, less attractive history.
Yeah, so thank you, Sam, for saying that information. We've talked a lot today about this sort of revisionist history that Georgia Tech has created for itself. A lot of the information that I've heard today from Alex, and Sam is new information that I haven't heard ever before. But I also think it's important to mention the first and the prominent first that Georgia Tech has highlighted, because it frames the context of our conversation today. So just starting in 1961, the three pioneers, Ford C. Green, Ralph A. Long Jr., and Lawrence Williams became the first African Americans to enroll at Georgia Tech. Then in 1965, Ronald Yancey graduated with an electrical engineering degree from Tech, and he was the first Black Georgia Tech graduate. In 1970, Adesola, Nuruddin, Tawana Miller, Grace Hammonds, and Clemmy Watley became the first Black women to enroll at Tech. And then 6 years later, Tawana Miller and Brenda Galop became the first Black women to graduate with a bachelor's degree and the four-year program at Georgia Tech. In 1977, Professor Augustine Isogbu became the Institute's first Black tenured faculty member. Then in 1980, Dorothy Yancey received tenure in 1980, becoming the first Black female faculty member to be promoted and tenured as a full professor at Georgia Tech. And then in 2010, Jacqueline Royster led the Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts from 2010 to 2019 as the first Black dean at Georgia Tech. And then in 2011, Gary May served in several roles at his alma mater, eventually becoming the first Black dean of the College of Engineering. So there's a lot of Black history in between the times that I've said, but these are just the prominent ones that you can see on Georgia Tech's website. You can see it on Institute Communications, so I thought that they were important to highlight. But this is something that I hope most people in this room know, but there's also things that we aren't aware of, and that's the hardships that they faced. Sorry, it sounds kind of loud. So starting with the three pioneers, as Alex mentioned, they didn't receive a degree from Georgia Tech due to unjust and unfair treatment from students and the university. Then moving on to Ronald Yancey, faced discrimination and was forced to complete additional coursework to receive his degree. This included 18 exams in 5 classes, 6-hour exam for extra credit, and a 30-page paper. And these 3 things are all things that the other 300 graduates that walked across the same stage he didn't have to do because they were white and he was Black. Tawana Miller, professors mispronounced her name. She was called the N-word, and students hung pictures of monkeys on Black students' doors. Evelyn Hammonds, this is a quote directly from her. The atmosphere on Tech's campus was always tense. You felt like anything could set off some racial issue, but mostly the white students and Black students just stayed apart from each other. So these hardships are all things that have come to light because we've been able to have the conversation with those who face them to let us know what they've experienced. And the fact that many of these pioneers are still alive today means that we need to continue having these conversations. We need to bring it to light before the time is too late, before we can't know the history because they're no longer alive.
Oh, and yeah, I'll add to that as well. Like I said, I had ended up having a conversation with Lawrence Williams, and I found out so much about his life, so much about the hardship he faced here. Some of the things he told me were really insane. I mean, he had security all the time, his phone was tapped all the time, and a lot of the details that I think a very important part of his experience here and kind of lend itself to understanding, why these students, felt the need to transfer at the time. I think I shouldn't have to have met him in person to know that stuff. And, I do think, it is amazing, the progress and the steps and the bravery of these people, but I think, overshadowing what they went through is detrimental to, understanding the full history.
So we're gonna move into where we are now.
Can you all hear me? So as of right now, Georgia Tech has over 20 Black student organizations, and the enrollment for Black students is currently at a all-time high. Now, is that high really that high? No, but it is steadily growing, and one thing that I want to urge everybody to look out for is those numbers following the enrollment of the 2024-2025 class, because this will be the first class post affirmative action. So we'll see if those numbers continue to rise in a positive trend. And also our Black Alumni Network has created the Black Alumni Organization, which is extremely active on campus and with all the Black student organizations that we see. Some of the recent initiatives we have, among many, many more that we couldn't name, are the Diversity Symposium and the statues, which were here as of 2019, the chartering of the NAACP chapter here at Tech as of 2022, the D9 Plaza, which came here in 2023, and most recently, the URGE demonstration and forum, which many of you here are familiar faces who were there also. And so now to get into what URGE is and why it matters today. So considering recent changes by the Supreme Court, all of us came together as students and came up with URGE, which is what we're experiencing here today. URGE stands for the Underrepresented Groups in Education at Georgia Tech, and it was developed as a coalition to promote efforts of inclusion here on Tech's campus. So the demonstration, which was led by the NAACP, but also very much supported and helped plan by every Black student org and just Black students in general on this campus. And so after the demonstration, where we marched throughout campus and had demands and spoke with many different faculty and staff about our concerns, we were able to have the URGE Forum, which was co-hosted by OSA and the BAO. And this became the first open conversation directly between minority student leaders and administration. And this has since been adapted into something that will happen monthly. And it's a governance forum by SGA, so a very big leap that was necessary for us to continue the conversation and not just have one demonstration or one forum, but something we can always come back to so the progress never stops. And so today, we are demanding a true acknowledgement of Tech's racist past and its present repercussions, because the Black community here and everywhere deserves respect. We all know from the archivists, from this conversation, there's a lot of things we still haven't acknowledged, a lot of things we still aren't aware of. But with persistence, with students always asking questions and being inquisitive, we can uncover a lot more. We'll never know the full extent of what people went through. There will always be that person who's stuck in an archive somewhere that was forgotten by Tech's history or by the university history, the registrar, every university within the United States. But through things like this, we can always continue to take steps forward. So 1961 was not the end, but rather the beginning, and something that we're still fighting for today.
Okay, and so today, once again, is about reckoning with the past, especially Tech's past, and thus realizing a better future, because you can't make progress without looking back at where you came from. And so with that being said, we are going to move into the final portion of the event. We're going to do a little panelist conversation. And in this portion, it's Q&A. It's an open conversation. So we'd actually love, I think there's going to be a microphone here. Okay, so there's going to be a microphone. And we would love to have questions presented. Any questions, concerns, suggestions. If any of you guys were at the first URGE forum, then you know, and even at the governance forum, then you know that, you know, we're here to kind of hear what everyone has to say, hear the voices of the students, and then relay that to any administrators that are not here today.
So thank you all so much for coming and experiencing this with all of us and uncovering some history that a lot of us have never heard of before. We'd like to start with some self-introduction, so I'll go ahead. My name is Chisholm Anya. I'm a fourth-year biochemistry major with a French minor at Georgia Tech. I am the president of the Georgia Tech Student Ambassadors, and I am the vice president of Student Life within SGA. This initiative, I've been supporting Sam and Camille independently, working with URGE, and I was really, really blessed to be able to be a part of this movement. So I felt that it was extremely important for SGA to do its part in promoting Black student voices on this campus, and thus was the birth of the URGE Governance Forum. So it is exciting to see a room full of people who are passionate and interested in hearing that our DEI initiatives on campus and how to promote them. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I'll let everyone else do an intro as well.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So once again, my name is Sam Bolton. I'm a business administration major. I am the president and founder of the Organization for Social Activism. And yeah, once again, this is a continuation of the URGE Forum and the URGE as a movement itself from last semester. And it's something that we want to continue, because having this conversation, having a space where it's not students against administration, but students with administration, students being able to be heard, and administration being able to actually hear what we need. Because what I found out is, you know, a lot of the people that I considered, you know, I don't want to say our enemies, but, you know, the people that were kind of making it hard for us to make progress are truly our allies. A lot of the administrators want exactly what we want, and they just don't know what we want until we say it. So once again, like Chisholm said, to reiterate, we're really happy to have you guys all here today and to just be able to continue this conversation.
No.
Well, I just gave an introduction, but I did not say my major. So, yeah, once again, I'm Camille Trotman. I'm a literature, media, and communications major. I'm a graduating senior, and I plan to be enrolled in law school this upcoming fall. And I wear many hats on campus as a student athlete and a Black student leader.
You can keep it. Hopefully mine works. I graduated a very long time ago, not from Georgia Tech, so I went to the other school in the state, Georgia, but I studied history and women's studies, if that matters for y'all. But I'm the university archivist. My name is Alex McGee, and I'm just really excited to be here with these great students and have this conversation.
So we want to kick it off for a couple questions for you all as an audience to kind of think about, and then as you line up and come up to the mic, you can either share your thoughts or ask us questions. I will be transcribing everything that is occurring here, so then we can create formal recommendations to the president's office, the provost, as well as other administration for underrepresented groups in education and what we would like to see change. So first question to think about is, it has been an impediment that students applying to American universities has been denied educational opportunities because of the color of their skin. Do you believe that structural inequities in student enrollments continue to exist? And please elaborate. And last, in the face of ongoing racial barriers, how can Georgia Tech continue to facilitate meaningful conversations that deal with complex issues that impact students? And if you know of any current methods or forthcoming actions, please share. So I would invite everyone to take a moment to think about those, as well as think about the other questions and thoughts, concerns, and suggestions you have. And whenever you're ready, please feel free to walk up to the mic near Miss Manning and ask your questions or share your concerns. Thank you.
And if you're unable to physically come to the mic, just raise your hand and we'll make sure to get it to you also.
Hello, my name is Effie. I'm a senior studying public policy. This isn't necessarily a question or something to do with administration. This is something that I've noticed in the Black GT community and that I'm very passionate about. So we're talking about telling full Black stories, giving full personhood to Black stories, but on Georgia Tech's campus, a lot of students, a lot of Black queer students feel like we're not accepted in Black orgs and that our stories aren't being told. And if organizations aren't actively hostile to us, they don't listen to us at all. And so I would like to know what you all are doing to make your organization safe for Black students. And I also want to know, in general, what have you done in the past to help Black queer students, and if you are planning to do anything to help Black queer students in the future.
I know in terms of the NAACP, new org, but one of our goals is to constantly be working towards encompassing the full Black community. And I know last semester, this wasn't necessarily with queer students, but we made sure we had a meeting about Black students with disabilities and the reality surrounding that, because that's also another community that I feel like is usually not only extremely marginalized, but often just invisible. And we had a whole meeting dedicated to just how we can continue to support those groups. And I will say we haven't had anything necessarily about Black queer students, but now that you've said that, that's something I'm sure we will push to have in the future. And especially with us being a grassroots organization, most of all the things we do is we always want to make sure any meeting we have, we're not just talking about something and just giving our grievances. There's always okay, now that we did this, what's our action item? What's our plan? So I would love to have further conversation with you about action items you want to see. So, because I know a lot of times when it comes to queer stories within the Black community, it's a lot of talk and not a lot of, okay, now what can we do? What policy can we change? What can actually be real things we can see, so that we just don't know, oh no, I'm here to support you, but how can I support you? So I think that would be a great conversation on how we can not only make it a safe space, but a place that can cultivate real change through policy action or different initiatives on campus.
Okay, yeah, I can also address that. I really appreciate you bringing that up. I really do, because I feel like in a lot of initiatives, especially when it comes to addressing, minority groups, and I feel like it always feels like you need to take baby steps, like, and even just this, like addressing the full Black history, but I don't think, like, you're right, it shouldn't be like just addressing Black history, just addressing Black students. We shouldn't have to go step by step, like, okay, Black students and then Black queer students, like, we should, address it all at once, and that should be a priority. And, like, I really do appreciate you bringing that up. And I will say for my organization, and obviously, once again, we're putting this down, and I would love to bring that up also to, when we present this stuff to the administration. But I'll say for my organization, at least, one of our main things is collaboration and kind of the overlap of justice principles. So when it comes to events and just in general, we try to overlap kind of all the advocacy we do with, like, kind of where they overlap. So, like, for example, next week we have an event that's environmental justice, or, and sustainability, but also environmental justice, like how it affects, the Black community. But I'm not sure if we've had one specifically for Black queer students and Black queer awareness, but I will definitely keep it in mind. I really do appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, just want to lastly add, thank you so much for bringing that up. I appreciate your courage and your bravery to stand up and tell us something about Georgia Tech that we may not know. So I appreciate that. I echo everything that Camille and Sam both said. I think further conversations absolutely need to be had, and I wrote that down in this notebook, and I would love to meet with you. In terms of the organizations that I'm a part of within Student Ambassadors, Adiba is my Vice President of Internal. We have worked extremely hard in the past few years. I've served on exec for the past 2 years. I'm president now, and it has been one of our main priorities to increase diversity, equity, inclusion as a whole in the organization that when I was joining it was not there. So for some quick statistics for those of y'all who don't know, in my ambassador class when I had been accepted in 2022, 2022, there were 6 Black students out of 40-something students total who were accepted. In this past year, 2024, there were 18. So when I tell you that we are actively keeping students of color in mind in every aspect of our organization, in our policies, in our bylaws, in our recruitment process, we are working hard, and there's absolutely more work to be done. So I appreciate you bringing this up, and I would love to have further conversations with you as well.
I'm always open to conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Effie.
Bianca.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bianca Mitchell, and I'm a second-year industrial and systems engineering major. My question is, URGE came about after the enlightening of the affirmative action case, and it stands for Underrepresented Groups in Education. I'm kind of wondering, how is URGE targeting other demographics on campus, not just the Black community? Because I understand that there's other communities on campus who feel like they weren't necessarily included in URGE, and I just want to bring light to their voice in the room.
So I will say there were other minorities invited to participate in URGE, and we didn't receive any participation, but the door remains open. And of course, I can't say or act like I'm positive I hit or us as a group hit every single minority org on this campus, because I know we didn't. There wasn't enough people involved to make sure that happened. But now, with us having this forum, with us doing things like this, we can make sure it happens. But I also want to say, as students, if you have friends who are in these other orgs, that especially the major ones, they were reached out to, and there was no response. So push them to do these things. I feel like a lot of times, especially at Tech, it's an issue with Black student orgs, it's an issue with all orgs. We do not overlap with other minorities. It just doesn't happen. And when we do that, I feel like we'll have unlocked something much bigger than anything we've done thus far. So reach out to your communities, have them come to these meetings. They're always welcome. I know sometimes it can seem like stuff like this is just for Black students, but it all has to start somewhere.
Just to add to that, in the inception of URGE, everyone up here, all the students up here, along with many students sitting in the audience and even students who aren't here today, sat down together and talked about the name of this organization. There were a lot of opportunities for us to call this like the Black Coalition or that, and we were extremely intentional in calling this, this movement the Urge for Underrepresented Groups in Education. We did reach out to multiple organizations. We didn't receive responses, but like Camille said, the door is always open. And the reason why I made it a point to continue this monthly open forum is to create that point of accessibility for everyone, not just Black students, but for all underrepresented groups in education to be able to have that voice. So I encourage all of you to go into your communities and continue to search for the people who may have something to say and not recognize that this might be a space for them, because this is a space for underrepresented groups in education to be able to speak. And that's exactly the purpose and the mission of it. So thank you for telling us.
Thank you so much.
Well, I think, is Morgan?
Hello, I'm Morgan. I'm a freshman at Tech. I'm a Comp major of a minor in LST. Sam, Chisholm, Camille, I have so much respect for you guys. Thank you for putting something like this on. I kind of wanted to answer your question that you were asking earlier in terms of things that are so systemically affecting minorities. And something that came to mind for me, and as I've been in the school more, is I suppose Georgia Tech rewards students with more credits, specifically when you come in, when it comes to housing selection, thank you, class registration, and many other things. And it's no secret that minority students are more likely to come from high schools and non-college education that doesn't offer APs and offer dual credit and things of that nature. And as a result, I've seen my own friends be disadvantaged at this school and at other schools, honestly, because they didn't have this head start. I'm sure there are practical reasons behind the way that we do that. But I suppose what I'm saying is that I think a great initiative within organizations such as your own would be reaching out to high school students and making them aware of different outlets that they can reach, so that they can not only be more prepared for classes in general, but be prepared for the fact that there is sort of a merit system when it comes to academics, so that they are able to access more things. So yes, and additionally, I'm not D9, but I have noticed that in terms of the D9 Plaza, I don't think students on campus truly understand it or know what it's for. I've had non-Black students tell me they thought it was for dead fraternities, things of that nature. And I've seen literal cops sitting in places where, to my understanding, they're not supposed to be sitting. That's just something I was sort of thinking about on the side. But I think that general education to the masses of Georgia Tech is another thing that should be addressed.
Thank you. So just off the first part of your statements, I want to bring attention to BSRT, Black Student Recruitment Team. They're working really hard to make sure that they're able to go to these schools still, especially following affirmative action, and able to, have conversation with students after they're admitted or before they're admitted. But there's a whole group dedicated to making sure that students can hear from Georgia Tech students and know certain things. But I also do know that there is conversation within the D9, that's just because that's what I'm familiar with. A lot of people, I know some of the girls from my chapter just came from a high school, I forgot, one of the local high schools, just talking about college and how to matriculate. But it is a major problem that I had a conversation with Rick Clark, the head of admissions, about like what that will look like and how they're able to, when looking at minorities, how that discussion goes. Because a lot of students come from Title I schools or just schools that don't have things like AP and IB courses, like how is that looked at? And he did somewhat assure me that they look at like kind of the school, the profile of the school when admitting students, to be sure that they'll know maybe the student didn't take 10 APs, but they also only had one that was offered. So they try not to use that on admissions, but it definitely should be a bigger conversation so that students do come here and realize, well, somebody is like 3 semesters ahead of me because of what they did in high school. And it's not fair, but I have OMED, I have different places on campus I can go to support me so I don't feel so behind. But I think that's a great thing that we probably need to put more emphasis on, because a lot of students don't know what support they have when they come here, and you do feel like, oh my gosh, everybody has taken calculus. Everybody already knows how to do physics, and I don't. Like, do I belong here? Yeah, and then for the D9 thing, that's been a very big conversation amongst all of the orgs, because we've had students say that D9 was racist for not letting them sit there, which is like, that's crazy, but they have no clue how crazy they sound. So there has been like I believe a temporary sign placed that kind of gives a blurb of history, but something more permanent is on the way, and there is constant conversation with administration and meetings that we're having with admin to figure out how can we make sure people know what this is, because at other schools there's no like, oh, what is this? Like, people know because it's talked about. So we're having that conversation because it's very upsetting to all of us.
I want to add specifically on the D9 Plaza. Part of my role as Vice President of Student Life includes cultural and diversity affairs on campus. First of all, I am not D9, but I understand your frustration and the frustration of D9 members on campus, Black students on campus, because it is frustrating. It's frustrating to have worked so hard and advocate so hard for something like the D9 Plaza. They've been advocating for that for decades. And to finally have it come to campus but then not be respected is extremely disheartening. I want to also let everyone know that we're working on it. Like Camille said, there is a temporary plaque in place right now, but a permanent plaque is on the way. Dr. Harrington specifically has worked really, 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 really hard at this. She's sitting back there. You know, she wants to take over, but she's been doing an incredible job, genuinely working really hard at this. What we're doing in this year has never been done before. So we are challenging tech in a way that they have not been challenged, and it's a positive thing, but because of that, sometimes it takes a little time. So we are committed to continue to keep y'all updated, but that permanent plaque will be coming, and along that, an educational opportunity, and that's something that Dr. Harrington is committed to make sure that happens. So I will know that at least my dying breath will make sure that's there.
And I'll add real quick, one thing that I do really hope to come out of, this whole process, the urge and everything, is kind of, making sure that administration understands that it's not about just having the thing, it's about the intention. It's about making sure students know, how to best utilize what they give us, because I think sometimes it does feel like tech will create things or give things and just be like, well, now we have it, and then just drop it there and kind of walk away. And so that is something, now that we're having this conversation, we can kind of address, and we can get them to understand, as students, how it actually feels, how it actually comes off. And so we do hope to kind of address that going forward.
Thank you. To that point, I just think it's so, we walk past the houses every day. We know everything that they do and do not want in that side of Greek life. They should at least know what to do with our culture. So,
100% agree with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love her.
Hey. Okay, so I'm Diego, and for some context, I grew up here in Atlanta, in Southwest Atlanta, actually southwest of Morehouse, in the West End, if any of y'all are from Atlanta. And so my question for you guys is, I'm wondering, what do you see the scope of URGE being? Is URGE a program that looks to develop and further minorities here on campus, or are we talking about the greater Atlanta area? Because one of my bigger concerns is when we're talking about evaluating the history of Georgia Tech and the cultural context in which we exist, we are overlooking the cultural context of Atlanta as a whole. And my personal experience, as a student of color and living in this very low-income neighborhood, we have this bubble of privilege, and family is in Southwest Atlanta, in the West End. And so, every weekend I go back to take care of my little brother in the West End, and it's so demeaning to leave this beautiful, beautiful campus and go right past Northside, and it's not decrepit, but I mean, people are struggling. and my people are in so much pain. And it reminds me every time I take that drive or I walk, like, I don't belong here. This institution was not built for me. So I'm wondering, do you guys see the urge, the underrepresented groups in education as something that is going to impact the greater Atlanta area? Are we looking to bring projects to revitalize, not just cultural competency on campus, but also the well-beings of the severely underfunded communities that surround campus, and that we pretty much just, we put wax in our ears and we go, la la la, we can't hear you, but they're right there. It's right across North Avenue, right across Northside Drive.
I know I'll say Urge as of right now is really anything we want it to be. It's student-led, it's student-created, it's brand new. We're really just, we're chatting about this every week, like what's next? So if that's what you feel needs to be next, that's what's next. Like, I feel like that's one thing with us having these new student orgs, we just chartered the NAACP here, like, we are doing the things. All the hard things are coming from the students who are here currently. And it's not like something that's been here for years or something that's already has such a strong foundation, people are scared to shake it up. Like, no, we're making the foundation now. So that can become a part of it just as easily as this forum became a part of it. And I feel like what you're saying is so true. Like, I always joke that, like, once you go past Home Park, you're in the real Atlanta. We're in this little bubble of Georgia Tech. And I know, like, the NAACP, when we do a lot of stuff with voting initiatives and everything. And when we go around the community and we're, like, canvassing and knocking on doors, like, we're not, like, most of the people we interact with aren't tech students, because most tech students will not sign up to vote. But the people who we knock on the doors to in Fulton County as a whole, that's who we're really here to service. And so I do think that's an easy thing to do, because we have students like you who are from here, who can give that insight and who can really make that happen. Like, there's no set plan for what we're doing. And it's not like we have administrators like telling us how we can go about this. This is all about us. This is all us. So just because you said that, now it's like, yeah, that is what Urge is going to become. Whatever. We can do whatever we want. We can become whatever we want. And I really, just the same way he just brought that up, I want other students to know this is the whole point of this forum. Is for students to say things that they feel like we need, because we haven't got a chance to have these conversations and let administration hear us and let other student orgs hear us. We have students from so many different BSOs here right now. Like, everybody just heard you, and I'm sure everybody's going to go home and talk about it.
I'll add, one thing I really wanted, is this still, oh, okay. Okay. I do want to say, like, one thing I really want to address even today, I'd wanted to talk about kind of the history of, like, the impact tech has had on the Atlanta community that isn't talked about, like the negative impacts, because, yes, it's a great campus, it's amazing, but we're in this community and we, like you said, like, we have the potential, the resources to help. But I feel like there is kind of that it's that bubble. We're in this bubble, and, that's kind of one giant thing I really want to kind of stress with, like, this whole acknowledging the full story, acknowledging the full everything. Like, we do need to acknowledge, like, our full circumstance, like where we are, what this institution is, where we are, what we're capable of. And that is one thing, like, when it comes to addressing tech's history and tech's kind of impact, it's always, and it should be glorified. There's a lot of glorious things about this institution, but it is kind of overshadowing a lot of the negative impacts that tech has had. And so, like, I think the first step is kind of acknowledging where our own shortcomings have been, like where our own negative impact has been on the local community. And then, yeah, going from there, like, understanding, like, how we can help. And I wish I remembered who it was or what conversation I was having, but I remember hearing a story about one of our previous deans who had done a bunch of work in DEI, had done a bunch of work in trying to start this program, like basically a community partnership program with the community of Atlanta. And I believe it was a she, but she had done all this work and had, like, put the program in place and put all this, like, just all of this into it, and the community was already, like, relying on it. They were already, like, super excited to work with us. And then from what I remember, the story goes that the institution basically just kind of pulled out funding kind of last minute. Like after they'd already decided we're going to help with this and this, they were kind of like, oh, actually, we're going to give these resources to something else. And I think like that kind of stuff, like that just story, and I'm pretty sure that dean resigned right after that. And it's that kind of stuff where, that kind of constant just negligence of where we are and what we can do. I completely agree. I think that, as Camille was saying, I think that is a great next step of what we can do as like powerful students here and with the power we have. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, and for the three of you, I want you to be thinking, the reason why I asked, like, not, is this something you want, but is this in the scope of what you envision? Because as we go forward with URGE, it's very important that we're being intentional with exactly what URGE is about, what it represents, and how we can help our people. And so if we envision URGE as something that is going to go beyond Tech Campus, which I think that it should be, and I want to remind us all in the room today that as recipients of privilege, we are obliged to give back to the communities from which we came.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Hi, my name's Asia. I'll preface, I am actually the president of the Black Student Recruitment Team that was highlighted a little bit earlier. So this is going to be kind of a comment, and it's going to eventually turn into a question, trust me. So I want to kind of mention what was said before about being in like a bubble. I definitely agree. One thing we're focusing on with our team this year is getting uncomfortable, going to these schools that people were scared to go to, going to minority-centered schools and teaching, going back and actually bringing STEM classes to these middle school students in Fulton, DeKalb, Atlanta Public Schools. That has been our main focus the entire year. We've been doing a lot of workshops, webinars, seminars, hosting events. And we're not the only organization that does it, I will say. But I do think, I want to put that out there that, we know that we're privileged enough to go to tech, even if we didn't come from privileged backgrounds. So we want to give back. However, I will say to that is, I feel like a lot of people here at different organizations on campus have been doing the work, but not getting the exposure. I believe these events are happening, these workshops are happening. I would want to see how, as a school, we can help elevate these events to become more focused out in the public. It shouldn't be something that's word of mouth. And I'm not just saying that for my team, I'm saying that on the behalf of the Hispanic recruitment team. D9 organizations, I know they do a lot on campus too, that don't get highlighted as much, as well as the Multicultural Pan-Hellenic Council. I spoke about this a little bit in a training like a week ago. We did talk about how history here is at Tech and making sure we also teach that a little bit more. The same way that everything else, you get emails on your phone from the Daily Digest and all these things, and we're talking about, every time I look down my phone, I hear about research we're doing. I hear about, these big, new buildings getting built, but I'm not hearing about what our organizations are doing. And it's kind of like, we can only do so much on our end, and I also want to open the door there. Our team's also open in collaboration as well. There's been a lot of talks about how can we get high schoolers involved, DEI, and basically with affirmative action, what's the response with that? And our team, that's our sole focus. I would like to have more collaboration with that, especially involving when it comes to admissions. If you're gonna have something focused on admissions, please invite the Black Student Recruitment Team, Hispanic Recruitment Team, and Women's Recruitment Team. I feel like, one, we are certified to talk about this, being that we get trained on admissions. And I feel like, why not invite the people who know exactly what needs to happen to go ahead and speak on it? And that goes past Black student organizations, as past government associations, like, just in general. Those, I think, was my biggest things I remember I was trying to think. But yeah, I think this exposure of different organizations and what they're doing on campus is really important, as well as having the room for these organizations to have their events. You have an event where you're trying to help 300 high school students, but instead someone's throwing a party on campus, and now they're able to book this space for three times in a row. People can't find funding to host these things. You're trying to have these big events, you're trying to help the community, and you have $200 to do it. I think that's another thing I want to kind of bring attention to. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
wants
we may take.
But we should address that, right?
Well, I really want Chisholm to read those two questions again, and hopefully we can get at least some, at least a response to at least one of those. So you can go ahead and read it, and then we'll have this question, and then we'll see if we can get any response for those two.
Okay. Just Asia, I just didn't get the opportunity, but thank you for coming up here. I see you. Thank you for coming up here and sharing your experience and also sharing your thoughts and perspectives. Like I said, I've been writing everything down. So I appreciate everything you said specifically about increasing our collaboration with you all when it comes to affirmative action, because you guys are the experts. So I appreciate you a bunch. And I know we talked a couple weeks ago too, and I appreciate you. So thank you for sharing those. I agree with you that the exposure to some of the work that some of our student organizations do in the Atlanta community specifically is not shared. I mean, how many people in the room know what Lifting Our Voices is? And if you're Black, do not raise your hand. So like, that's my point. So Lifting Our Voices is an organization on campus that has helped feed over 2,000 homeless people. It's students who are doing this. Students who are going out, buying supplies with their own money, with their own time, making midnight Walmart runs. I was talking to one of the community outreach chairs last week, making midnight Walmart runs to buy jars and jars of PB&J to feed the homeless Atlanta community. Nobody knows about it. At least no students outside of the Black community in this room know about it. And yet they have been working so hard in our Atlanta community, unheard of. Those are the type of things that we need to, as an institute, as organizations, as peers, as leaders, as faculty, as staff, as representatives of something bigger than ourselves. If we live up to this idea of progress and service, improving the human condition, that's our motto, that's our call as Georgia Tech community. We have to be able to uplift others as well. So thank you, Asia, for bringing that up. Yeah, Lifting Our Voices, also known as Love, does have a sandwich run on Saturday on campus. So go to their Instagram, find the information, show up. So I'll read those questions one more time. Just to let everyone know, there are refreshments in the back. So if you'd like to grab a light refreshment as you're thinking about this, and then continue to line up and ask questions. But again, that first question was, it is important that it has been an impediment that students applying to American universities have been denied educational opportunities because of the color of their skin. Do you believe that structural inequities in student enrollments continue to exist, and why? And then the second question was, in the face of ongoing racial barriers, how can Georgia Tech continue to facilitate meaningful conversations that deal with complex issues that impact students? If you know of any current methods or forthcoming actions, please share. So I hope you guys continue to think about that as you fill your stomachs a little bit and continue to ask us questions. We really appreciate it.
Go ahead. Hi, can you hear me? My name is Kiara. I'm a first-year international affairs major with a minor in pre-law. And as an international affairs major, of course, I take a lot of liberal arts classes, public policy, international affairs. And I'm obviously very tolerant of conversations dealing with political issues of people from people who don't agree with me, who do agree with me. But I do feel that there is an environment in these classes where people feel comfortable saying racially and culturally insensitive things. And I just feel like being that URGE is newly created and the governance forums are newly created, this would be the perfect place to have discussions on that topic. And if y'all would be open to have discussions on that topic, I'd definitely come out. So that was just the comment I wanted to make.
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely, and I'll say, I don't know if this is still picking me up, but I'll say, like, we're writing that down, and, like, thank you for bringing that concern up, and, like, we are going to take these concerns and what you're saying to, you know, whoever we can. But I guess I kind of have a question. So when you say you feel like people feel comfortable kind of saying, you know, a little bit of whatever, do you think, is it facilitated by the teachers? Like, do you think it's kind of institutionally, or is it just like the students are, is it more student initiated, or are the teachers kind of allowing for that space, do you think?
I don't want to say the teachers intentionally not open up these spaces, but make them feel comfortable, but it's more so that the professors don't necessarily draw or have discernible boundaries, whereas something is inappropriate or something is just your opinion, and maybe they don't feel comfortable stepping in and saying that for fear of misunderstanding or being misconstrued, but there should be some type of action being taken by professors because you are in a position of authority and, this is your classroom.
Right. All right, thank you. We'll bring that up. Thank you.
Writing that down. Thank you.
What's up, everybody? I'm Kenny. I'm a second-year mechanical engineering major. And to answer your questions, I don't necessarily have an answer for them. I just have a comment. I just want to say that in reference to if there's a problem in Georgia Tech having like an administrative problem, like with accepting students and stuff, I believe that for there to actually be change, that the institute itself has to care just as much as the students care. Like y'all referencing earlier with the sandwich run, that students can only do so much on their side because they don't have the power. The people with the power have to care to change something. So if we can only do so much convincing as well. So if we're going to be trying to convince the people with the power to try and change something and they're not being convinced, then we have to put people that want to change things in those places of power so they can change things that need to be changed. So for example, you were telling a story about how some dean had all of these initiatives that he had and he wanted to make these changes, and he had his plans, and then the institute just pulled the funding at the end. Like, there has to be people that have the power with that funding that want to keep that funding with what, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That type of stuff. So yeah, that's basically all I had to say. If we want change, then we have to make the people that have the power to change things want to change things.
What's your name again? Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Kenny.
Kenny, okay. Thank you, Kenny. So I do want to challenge you just a little bit, Kenny. So you said that students don't have that much power. And to an extent, I agree with you. We are just students. We're not paid professionals on this campus. We're still getting our degrees. But look at the room you're sitting in right now. Do you know how many administrators are sitting here? You know the provost and the president are getting this virtually. So students are in a unique position in the sense where I agree with you that Georgia Tech has to care for things to change. But students have the opportunity to get Georgia Tech to care. Because at the end of the day, if an institute's mission is students first, students are our priority, and this is a priority of the students, then thus will be Georgia Tech's priority as well. So there is some agency, there's some individual agency in this that says, as individuals, we all have to play our role as well. That doesn't mean that things are perfect automatically, and it doesn't mean that things happen like a snap, but we do have a lot more power than you think we do. So.
And I do want to add one little thing. I will say also one thing I found with working with the administrators I've worked with, they do care. Most of the people that are at our institution do really truly care, and it is unfortunate and the position we're in right now because of recent changes in policy, recent things going on in the nation, and it really is actually kind of falling because of that, because of the restrictions that are being placed on these administrators. It may seem like they don't care because what they have to implement because of these policies as a public institution, there are things that our school just has to do, and even if our administrators don't like it, they have to do it. But because of that, kind of playing off of what Chisholm said, the power is kind of falling all to us. It's up to us kind of completely to make any change happen, because at this point, administrators don't have that power anymore. But I do agree, and I do think at some point there are a lot of things that we want to get done. It will take the administrators, but I am pleased to say I do think a lot of them are on our side. So I think we have that going for us. Thank you.
One thing I do want to say quickly, though, that is a little bit on a different note than what you guys said. I do want to urge students that we do, I feel like this is something I've struggled with while I've been here. There are some people whose job is to do the things that we're doing, and don't make it your job too. Of course, do things like this, have those conversations, push them, but don't let them continue to look at you to do their work. Call them out, no, I'm actually not gonna do that research. You get paid, I'm paying to be here. No, I pay your salary, please. do what you're supposed to do when it comes to certain things. Because I feel like a lot of times, especially Black student leaders, they'll keep knocking at your door and your door only as if no one else has a voice. Ask somebody else to do it. Get somebody else to do it. Do not be afraid to be like, actually, somebody else has the same expertise as me. There's other Black students who are living day by day at this school that you can ask their opinion. That's like a major thing. I feel like a lot of Black students, leaders here, get burnt out because we're doing the job that someone is paid to do. Force them to do their job, and if they don't, make noise about it. Good Trouble is, they have that mural in the Student Center. Good Trouble. Make it. Continue to say things, even if you feel like somebody might be trying to silence you, they don't want to hear it. Go big. Go to the news. I have been on the news and said stuff. I'm sure GT admin is like, why does she just like do it? You're paying to be at the school. They actually can't, well, I won't say they can't do anything to you, but they shouldn't. But like, sometimes it is hard. Sometimes it is somebody's job to do it. Make them do their job. If you feel like they're trying to make you do their job, call them out for it and continue to like make ruckus, because we as Black students, they always look to Black people to do everything. Sorry, y'all, I'm going a little hard. It's Black History Month. But like, no, actually, I'm not doing that because you can. And it's okay to say that. It's really okay to say that.
All right, thank you. Y'all's responses were very insightful, and I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
So we really have to start wrapping. I'm gonna honor the last two questions. We want to stay on, topic of the reason why we're here for this event. So we're gonna take these last two, give you time to mingle, have some refreshments, and then we're gonna close out. And please, if you can, make it brief.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Deshaun Taylor. I'm a fifth-year computer engineering major here. So mine it's a mixture of a question and a statement. The first thing I really want to piggyback off what you just said, I would just like to remind everybody here, as well as the administrators that are in the room, that our motto is progress and service. And I think that a part of that history, beyond just racial relations and things, minority relations, things of that nature, is that we've been known for pushing the envelope. Specifically in terms of everything that's happened with affirmative action. And I'm not as involved as I used to be because I'm just busy now, but I've been heavily involved with the Black Student Recruitment Team since I got here in 2019. And the numbers, while the application, things like that are going up, there is a danger to our yield for our minority groups from a racial standpoint, and that concerns me. And yes, we are constrained by some of the things that happen at a federal and a state level. There are regulations, but there are avenues and ways and things to look at to kind of get around those things. I know that I've heard talks that there's not as much comfort with funding for things like Black and Hispanic, like recruitment and outreach and things like that, just because of the labels associated with it in lieu of what happened regarding affirmative action. But there are other ways to label it. There are other avenues to place that funding. There are ways to continue these things. It is difficult to go out to those schools and to talk with those people when you don't have the money to do so. It's difficult to keep certain groups that aren't necessarily registered student organizations that do that work when the Institute is heavily worried about how to empower them. So I would just like to implore us as students to come up with ideas and to push the idea that we are an institution that pushes the bill, but also to remind administration that we need you all to look for those, I guess, loopholes and things of that nature, because there are ways to do the things that we still need to do without breaking the rules that are in place. And I guess that also goes in line with saying, do you still feel like there are things that are any forms of oppression or like barriers in lieu of that decision? Yeah, I think those are the barriers. I think the fear is becoming a barrier, and that there are ways to overcome it. We just need to push hard to do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Abigail Tumpy. I'm Vice President of Institute Communications, and I just first of all want to congratulate all of you for your leadership here. This has been a fabulous discussion. I actually had a question with regards to your thoughts, and this is actually builds great on the last person's comment. I also am really concerned about our yield. I'm concerned about our Black student admissions. I'm concerned about where we're going to potentially be headed in a future state. So thoughts you might have on how we can continue to make sure that we're going up in the right direction regarding undergraduate admission. So I'd love to hear that. And then the second part of it, I know you were worried about who from administration was here. I will tell you, I'm at a lot of these events, and so you might not know me. I'm new to the Institute, just joined actually 7 months ago. So either I'm here or usually a member of my team is here, and we care very deeply about many of the issues that you guys are talking about. And I will also tell you a little trick, which is a lot of this content that is created on social media is actually user-generated by students. So most of the social media handles at Georgia Tech, we get a lot of that content because students will tag us and we'll see the great work that they're doing of going out and feeding homeless people in the Atlanta area, and then we'll pick that up and promote it. So there's ways like that that you guys can simply tag us to let us know what you guys are doing, and we're able to pick that up and share some of that information. So look forward to your comments.
Thank you. In the nature of delegation, I'm going to ask Asia to come up here. She is expert in the room when it comes to recruitment. So in terms of, Abigail, your question about how we can increase or maybe address the concerns that we have in terms of yield with our POC students, I'm going to let Asia answer that.
Hi, everyone. So first, I want to kind of just mention how Georgia Tech's process is. So we do something called holistic admissions. Holistic admissions means we take account a lot of factors into how we look at applications. This includes looking at your GPA. This includes your courses. How heavy was your workload? Are you taking those advanced level courses? We're going to look at your involvement, community service. Are you in clubs and organizations? Have you started something? Are you working? So there's not a one size fits all when it comes to applications. So there is no such thing as, oh, this is the perfect student and they're just going to get in here. That's not going to happen. How can we increase our yield efforts? First, like I said before, how we're doing in BSRT now, getting uncomfortable. One, you have to acknowledge the needs of Black students in general. Are we providing financial services for students when they come here? Yeah, they get in, but can they afford can they afford to be here? Can they afford the deposits? Can they afford housing? Because if you go back and look, there's going to be some other colleges who are going to give them a little bit more money than we are. And that's just bottom line. Another way to increase is go to these neighborhoods that are minority driven that you've been scared to before. Are we going and teaching these students at their freshman and sophomore year how they can be more advanced? Are we looking at, can we increase the amount of STEM activities we give to those students? Another thing is also making sure that this campus is a good environment for these students to come into. Numbers do not matter if they are not taken care of once they get here, and they're going to see it. That includes being more diverse in how you're talking about our institution, how you are presenting our institution as far as tours go. I know us as BSRT, we have created our own tours, and we've also worked with student ambassadors to make their tours more diverse and more equitable. Are you respecting or highlighting the different Black student organizations? We talked about D9 before all tonight. Showing students that there is a community here was really important as far as this yield effort goes. Now, is affirmative action going to harm numbers? That's just how it's going to be. It's the Supreme Court decision. There's only so much you can do. I suggest you go back and actually read that decision and also go look at what's happening on the state level. As far as another thing you can help yield offers is work with our team. The Black Student Recruitment Team, reach out to me at any time. You can reach out to my advisors, Kevin Dodson and Larry Argueta, as well as the Hispanic Recruitment Team as well. Reach out to us because there's already initiatives being put in place. There's work that's already been done that we would love to collaborate on. We would love to come and talk to students or talk to student organizations, how you can get more involved. We can explain affirmative action a little bit further, but I feel like it's going to require a hands-on from all places, from student organizations to students, administration. Everyone should care about this just as much as we do. I hope that answers the question. I can get a little bit more detail if I need.
I think that was good. Thank you.
Thank you, Asia. So That concludes the second ever Urge Governance Forum. Thank you all so much for coming. Again, enjoy refreshments. If you were unable to ask a question at this point in time, or you just had a thought after hearing some of the discussion we had, feel free to approach any of us at any time. I am really bad. Like, I give my number out to everyone. It's kind of bad. But I do mean it in the sense of, like, I want you all to feel that you have access to the students who are up here right now, who want to hear from you, who want you to be a part of what we're doing. So you guys are already sitting here in this room, that's step one, and continuing to uplift your voices in all your various organizations and all of your involvements as you do is only gonna help as we progress our mission. So the next Urge Governance Forum will be in March at OMED. SGA posted it on our Instagram, so we'll be here. There's always gonna be this space.
Can I say something really quick? I want to mic. I just want to say, like, I'm blown away by all the students here, and y'all are doing amazing work. And I think the reminder I just want to leave for you guys as the university archivist is, like, what you are doing right now at Georgia Tech is literally the stuff that students will come into our reading room and ask about 20 years from now. So maybe even 10 years from now. So what you are doing, like, document, document, document. And if you want help, we will help you. This is the exact kind of stuff that our archives is lacking, but this is how we make sure that the history that we have here is more inclusive. So just want to say that. Great job, yeah.
So thank you. I want to wrap by saying, reckoning with the past. That was a lot to even hear about. And all of these things that we're doing this evening, all of your participation will help us all realize a better future for how we move forward. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all online for joining us, and have a good evening. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I want to thank our presenters. I'm sorry that I was supposed to be a part of this. Sam, Bolton, Chisholm, Alex McGee, Alex Brinson, Camille, and Adiba. Thank you all for accepting this invitation, for coming and collaborate on this Black History Month event with us here at the library. Thank you so much.